Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something genuinely fascinating. We're going to unpack an executive summary of a financial and business needs analysis. Now, you might hear F&A and B&A and think it's just corporate jargon, but in plain English, it means we're looking at the exact step-by-step blueprint of how you can take illiquid, totally dormant numismatic assets, think rare coin collections, and transform them into a million-dollar commercial real estate acquisition. And the absolute kicker here? We're doing it without ever actually selling those assets on the open market. Okay, let's just dive right into this.
Here's the precise architectural pathway we'll be exploring today. We're going to start by defining the core problem, the liquidity gap, and then set up our F&A mathematical bridge. After that, we'll walk through the strict four-phase B&A implementation engine, covering revaluation, compliance, the LBO, and the LCO. Finally, we'll wrap up with the contractual safeguards.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the liquidity gap.
Every great financial strategy starts by identifying a really high-stakes problem, right? Well, just think about the massive disparity we're dealing with here. On one hand, our client has just $3,000 in liquid fiat. That's the cash actually sitting in the bank. But on the other hand, their objective is to acquire commercial real estate for a 5-home development project. And that purchase price? It's sitting somewhere between $850,000 and a cool $1 million. I mean, that is literally a gigantic financial canyon to cross.
So, the absolutely crucial question is this: how do we bridge this gap? Now, the client happens to hold a 418-piece numismatic proof set. The traditional old-school route would just be to sell it on the open market, throw it on eBay or take it to a public auction. But those markets are entirely subjective. They're driven by mood, aesthetic appeal, and totally unpredictable demand. So how do we extract $1 million of real usable value without subjecting the client to the chaotic whims of that public market?
That brings us to Section 2, F&A, the mathematical bridge.
This is where we stop guessing and start defining our exact mathematical targets. Institutional lenders and family offices operate on super conservative risk metrics, typically offering a 40% to 70% loan-to-value, or LTV, ratio against verified assets. Let's assume a 60% LTV for our $1,000 fiat advance target. To get that $1 million in cold, hard cash, the math dictates that the 418-piece coin set must achieve a verified, revalued market value, or RMV, of exactly $1,666,666. That is our hard, unmoving mathematical target.
And what's really interesting here is the built-in safety net this creates. You see, this specific 418-piece museum set actually has a potential valuation ceiling of $5 million. Because our target is only $1.66 million, it provides this massive, comfortable equity cushion. That cushion easily absorbs any risk-mitigating haircuts the underwriter might apply, easily satisfying the family office's requirements without stretching the asset's credibility one bit.
Moving right along to Section 3, B&A Phase 1, Reevaluation.
Having a target is great, but let's be real. A family office is never going to lend against a collector's subjective guess. We have to transition this collectible into mathematically reliable, institutional capital. The way we lock that value in is through what's called the triad of truth. To entirely prevent fraud and self-dealing, the power is split 3 ways. First, a certified numismatist rigorously grades the coins on a 1 to 70 scale, which establishes object truth. Second, an assayer applies a mathematical multiplier, establishing mathematical truth. And third, a civil law notary administers a sworn affidavit and irreversibly anchors this evidence onto the complied chain guard, or CCG blockchain. That establishes our procedural truth. No single person can manipulate this outcome. It's brilliant.
Let's actually see how this builds into real dollars using the Sheldon multiplier protocol. Inside this closed ARISAI network, the math is absolute. You basically take the universally recognized base retail value of an ungraded coin, say the $300 cost of authentication, and you mathematically multiply it by its verified Sheldon grade, let's say a perfect MS-70. Well, $300 times 70 gives you a definitive, locked, revalued market value of $21,000 for that single coin. You multiply that across a 418-piece set, and boom, you quickly surpass that $1.66 million target we needed.
Now for Section 4, B&A Phase 2 Compliance.
Math alone doesn't wire funds, right? Before a family office releases a single dollar, Those assets have to survive a seriously rigorous verification process. We call this the exhausting 8-gate cascade. First up, the physical coins are locked in an independent depository vault to prove strict chain of custody. You definitely can't just keep them in a shoebox in your living room. Next, the client has to clear global anti-money laundering, KYC, and sanctions screening. Finally, the family office's security interest is legally perfected in the public record via UCC-1 financing statement. This basically just ensures the collateral is unencumbered, totally clean, and legally bound.
Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Section 5, B&A Phases 3 and 4, LBO to LCO.
This right here is the climax of the entire strategy. The assets are revalued, they're vaulted, and they are perfected. Now, it's time to actually buy the real estate through Phase 3, the leveraged buyout, or LBO. The verified assets are deployed into the notional pooling system. The family office wires the $850,000 to $1 million in US dollars directly into an approved escrow account. The seller of the commercial real estate is paid entirely in pure fiat cash, and they walk away happy. Meanwhile, the client's operating trust takes clean, completely unencumbered title to the property. The real estate is officially secured, entirely backed by those vaulted coins.
But wait, we absolutely don't stop there. Immediately post-closing, we enter Phase 4 Liquidity Continuum Operations, or LCO. Because the newly acquired real estate is formally appraised, its equity is immediately pledged right back into the original coin collateral pool. This means you now have the vaulted coins and the real estate backing your position, massively expanding your total borrowing base.
So think about it. What happens when your collateral pool massively expands like that? The underwriters issue a new, much larger credit line. This new line entirely extinguishes the original acquisition loan, and in the process, it creates a massive surplus of liquid fiat. And this surplus isn't just numbers on a screen. It is the actual usable operational capital the client needs to construct the 5 commercial homes on the property. It turns into a perpetual growth engine fueled entirely by authenticated value.
Finally, let's look at Section 6, Contractual Safeguards.
Of course, none of this incredible structure works if the math can just be legally challenged by someone tomorrow. How does this entire ecosystem protect itself from the wild volatility of subjective public opinions? Well, the secret is the enforcement engine. To fully protect the family office, the transaction is governed by what's called a Tokenized Notary Service Agreement, or TNSA. This contract includes a mandatory asymmetrical arbitration clause. This is the ultimate legal shield that makes the math viable in the real world.
Listen to this core principle, because it's everything. By signing the TNSA, all parties legally agree in advance to accept the Sheldon multiplier formula as the absolute, unchangeable standard of collateral value for the transaction. If someone tries to argue that the public market would pay less for the coins, it doesn't matter. The arbitrator relies strictly on the contract. Subjective market disputes are legally and algorithmically eliminated. The multiplier is absolute.
So let's just quickly summarize the beautiful, structured journey we just took. We started with a massive liquidity gap, a client with just $3,000 in cash. We set our F&A mathematical target. We algorithmically locked the value using the triad of trust. We cleared a grueling compliance gauntlet, vaulted the assets, and executed the leveraged buyout to secure the real estate. Finally, we pledged the property back into the pool to expand the base via the LCO, generating the actual construction surplus. And all of this was powered by a 418-piece proof set that never once had to be sold on eBay. Which leaves us with this final, genuinely provocative thought. We just watched a totally illiquid collectible transform into a $1 million real estate acquisition using a strict architecture of trust, mathematics, and law. So, I have to ask you, what dormant assets in your own portfolio are just sitting there waiting to be mathematically awakened? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.